These kids should never, ever feel alone. These kids should be getting the best support whenever they need it.
There are a few people in this life, and I've met quite a few people. There are a few people who genuinely have inspired me as much as this lady does. So please show her all the love. Round of applause, Nikki Scott.
Thank you. This never gets easier, believe it or not. This year was obviously a bit of a milestone for us as a family. It was Lee's 10th anniversary of his death. And 10 years ago, when Lee was killed, I wasn't there to hold his hand or be by his side in those last moments. I can't even picture in my head where Lee was when he took his last breath. Lee's cup wasn't on the kitchen side, his toothbrush wasn't in the bathroom, none of his clothes were in my ironing pile. Lee was 6 weeks into his tour of Afghanistan. It had been 6 long weeks since I'd seen him and 5 days since I spoke to him. So when those 2 men walked into my home to tell me that Lee had been killed, it didn't seem real. It took me a long, long time to allow myself to accept that Lee was never actually going to walk back through that door again, and I was never going to see him again. It was so painful and so hard to process, and I was a grown adult, and I couldn't find a way to process it, so how was I going to expect my 2 young children to understand this? Every single member of Scotty's Little Soldiers has lost a parent like Lee that served our country, whether it was a terrible accident, painful illness, a murder, a suicide, or whilst on active duty, every single member is suffering and trying to process their loss. No matter how much they wish when they blow out the candles on their birthday cake, no matter how far they throw that coin down the wishing well, or how hard they cry themselves to sleep at night when they think no one can hear them, their wish will never come true. They're never going to see their hero again. And trying to process that as a child is unbearable. Not only are these kids trying to actually accept that, many of them will be moving out of their family homes and away from the forces community that they've grown up with. They will probably be starting at a new school halfway through the term, when none of the kids in that school are forces kids, and possibly no other bereaved kids. How can we expect our bereaved forces kids to go through all that and not have any mental health issues or need support at some point in their childhood? This country has a funny way of leaving grieving families alone and letting them just crack on until that child reaches crisis point, and then the family are told that there's a 12-month waiting list until they can get help. This is not right. Thanks, Kev. These children have lost their mum or their dad who died serving for our country. These kids should never, ever feel alone. These kids should be getting the best support whenever they need it. And thankfully, Scotty's has evolved over the years, and I'm so proud that the charity is now there for these kids from day one. We're putting a safety net under them and saying, we will catch you whenever you fall. We're putting plans in place to prevent them from reaching crisis point. These kids need to know they're not alone, and Scotty's has their back. We owe it to the guys and girls up there, don't we, to look after their kids. Stuart said earlier that the nation has signed up to the Armed Forces Covenant. Our country has made a promise to look after our bereaved forces children, and it's time we make sure that that promise is fulfilled. That good old saying of, it's been a year, surely they're over it by now, that's completely bull. I can tell you now, it's been 10 years since I lost Lee, and I'm not over it. In fact, I'm one of the lucky ones that has been able to move on, rebuild my life, meet another amazing guy who's helped me and my family. But I still grieve for Lee every day and his life. I still feel the pain and the heartache when I watch my kids miss him. I've recently heard about a lady who's 82 years old, and she phoned a helpline for support. When she was asked when her husband passed away, she said 40 years ago. 40 years, and she was only just asking for support, but she needed it 40 years on. The pain and loss of losing someone close to you never ever leaves you. And through Scotty's, I've seen firsthand that bereaved forces children can be affected at different stages throughout their whole childhood, no matter how long it's been since the death of their parent. We need to stand together now and be there for our fallen heroes' children whenever they need it. Now, just by attending here tonight, you've shown me that you care about these kids and you care about the children that they've left behind. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. So I'd like to just say personally, thank you to each and every one of you for coming here this evening. Now, next up we have our live auction, and it sounds a bit cheeky, but please don't be shy. Stick your hand up if you can, have a cheeky little bid, remember why we're here, and let's raise some money for these incredible, special, brave children. Thank you.
Nikki Scott. Quite an extraordinary woman. And do you know what? She doesn't know it. She has no idea how extraordinary she is.